So somehow art bypasses the material thing and goes to the idea. But music goes even further. It bypasses the concrete thing and the idea and goes directly to the ultimate. That's Schopenhauer now, and he calls this ultimate Wille. You can call it Tohen, or it's not important which name you give, but music is the most spiritual because it's the less material thing, the material of arts. So somehow these rhythms and meters and tonica, dominante, subdominante, melody, that are somehow the concrete things, concrete in music. And if you even this is not there, then it's even more higher up in a spiritual level than ordinary music.
Hello everyone, today I would like to welcome Christoph Maria Moosman. And so, did I say your name correct?
Yes, okay.
Yes, and so for those who don't know you, you've had a huge concertizing organ career, played with all kinds of symphonies and made recordings and played big concerts, and so might you say a few highlights of your career just to kind of share with people some of the places that you've played and symphonies and stuff like that?
Yes, for example, in Bamberg Symphony Orchestra, I played the world premiere of a concerto for organ and orchestra, and the same in Hamburg Symphony Orchestra. When there was the Arvo Pärt days in Zurich, I was playing the organ part, and I really came to know with so he asked me if he can have I showed him my recording, my disc, and he asked me if he could have an autograph.
Oh, wow.
Yes. Yes, what else? Tokyo, I think, was an interesting place. Yes, and for example, when we speak now about Tournemire, I had a concert in St. Clotilde, but it was contemporary music. But for the beginning, I make a reverence to the genius Loki and played a Frank second chorale in St. Clotilde.
Wow, yeah.
And I'm not only an organist, I also organize a festival of contemporary music, spiritual music, and I made commands to, most important, I think, John Tavener, and I visited him in England, in his famous room, and yes, it's just a Catholic Mass with echoes of other religions. And it was premiered in Zurich Cathedral, second American premiere in New York, English premiere in Brighton Dome. Yes, that was quite interesting thing.
Wow, what was it like meeting John Tavener?
Yes, that was great. Yeah. First, we met in a hotel, and the chiefs of Sikorsky have been there. And then he entered. He's a tall man, totally dressed in white, and so it was really impressive.
Wow.
And he had, I have sent him before the text, the Latin text, and the translation, and I have seen that he has worked through and made notices and was asking this and that, but it was very interesting to do this work.
And you met Arvo Pärt as well. You know, both of these composers were huge for me because they both did Orthodox music, but it's like contemporary Christian music, and it's very spiritual and, you know, mystical. And I love Pärt and love Tavener. So what was Arvo Pärt like?
Yes, that was this short meeting in Zurich, and then much later he sent me not the letter but the booklet of the city, where he had written by hand that he is much impressed by my interpretation. And I asked him to write something for my festival, and we had a telephone call, but he said, I'm too old now. Okay, you have to accept this. And perhaps if you like this kind of music, I also met Gia Cancelli in Tiflis. You know him?
I don't.
I think he's a very important composer. All his music is in HCM records. And yes, it's almost the same style, spiritual and music. Yes.
What's the name again?
Gia Cancelli. Cancelli.
Okay, yes. I'll look him up.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm about to do a concert of all sacred minimalist. So it's Arvo Pärt, Peteris Vasks, and Goretzky.
Cantata?
Not a cantata. It's like I have a violinist and a cellist and a soprano coming in. So it's a mix of stuff. You know, Vasks piece for cello and organ, and then the O Domina Nostra for soprano and organ, and then the Lonely Angel piano trio for violin and cello, and then the Arvo Pärt Spiegel im Spiegel. Which you know is mirror and mirror, but I don't know why in my mind it's face to face. So I've always thought that piece was sort of a echo of eternity. It's like when we shall behold him face to face. And then I realized, well, actually Spiegel, when I learned German, I was like, oh, Spiegel is not face, it's mirror, but
it's mirror, yes.
I guess it still works, kind of. Still has that affect. Well, anyway, so I learned of you because I saw some of your stuff on Facebook where you were going to record the complete Tournemire cycle, which is a very impressive undertaking. And so it's, for those who don't know, it's a chant mass. It's a French symphonic style chant mass for every Sunday of the year. There's 52 of these, and so each one, correct me if I'm wrong, but they all sort of range between like 15 minutes and a half hour. And so by the time that you put the whole thing together, it's some 20 to 30 hours worth of repertoire. It's just an insane amount of repertoire to learn. And it was written specifically for church with, you know, music before and then, you know, for the entrance and the exit and the offertory and the elevation. But it's quite an impressive work that not many people know of, that there's really not many recordings of. Some of these movements I have never been able to find a recording of. And to my knowledge, I think maybe one other person recorded the entire cycle, but it's not available on streaming anywhere. It's maybe, you know, you can, in some specialty shop, you can find some recording from like the 50s. I don't remember, but it's virtually inaccessible. I don't know of any accessible recording of the entire thing.
There are two entire recordings, but they are old, as to say. And one is from Müller, and he speaks on modern German organs. And the other is on the 1980s So I would say they are not more of up-to-date, state of the art now.
So what attracted you to this piece? So, and if I got anything wrong about Orgue Mystique, then correct me. But then what specifically brought you to this work? Because it's massive.
Oh, how long do you wish my answer?
As long as you want.
We could start in the time of my early childhood. The Second Vatican Concile took place. And so I really don't have the experience of the classical Latin Mass, but what I really know, what this feeling already as a child, that something very important is gone lost, and I have come several years, only few years too late to have learned it. And that was the reason why I studied Catholic Church music. But later on, other things were more interesting. I got in the contemporary music scene group and working with composers, and it was more interesting. But then, perhaps I have to add, my topics as a concert organist were mostly the French classical, the French 19th century, and contemporary music. And Tournemire is just between them.
Right.
And one thing more, I lost this interest in Catholic liturgy, but then this urge for spirituality arose in me. But I was looking for in the Eastern traditions. I made meditations, Hinduistic, Buddhistic. I was in India twice for meditation. And once, exactly in India, after 4 weeks of meditation, where either you are quiet or you speak English, at the end we should say some thank you, and it came in Latin, Deo gratias, Alleluia. And that was so impressive for me that I know, you have to go back to your roots. And so I rediscovered my own tradition somehow from the outside. And I wanted to re-establish the Latin Mass, but I don't know, but I think it's gone. So at least I make the music of the Latin Mass, which is somehow the essence, to pull it out and to save it somehow for coming centuries.
Sure. And so this specific music, the Orgue Mystique, is then more centered around the Tridentine Mass then, correct? Because of its sort of centrality of the Gregorian chants? Would that be correct?
Yes, you can say yes. There are 21, not 22. That's a bit strange, but there are 21 offices. For some Sundays, the organ doesn't sound in Lent and in Advent. And plus, there are some feasts which are not on Sunday. So here, at first, Thunemeyer wanted to make 65 pieces, but then it were 51. And each of this office contains 5 pieces, which are meant exactly for the Mass. The first is Prélude à l'introit, Offertoire, Élévation, Communion, et Pièce terminale. And they are meant to be played during the Mass, and the duration and the character fit precisely with what is needed in this place in the Mass. And yes, all these pieces are based on the Gregorian chant from this very day.
So would it not be appropriate then in a Novus Ordo Mass, or, could hypothetically at some big cathedral, like a French organist or organist in the United States, use these on typical Sunday?
Of course you can. I also played it in a Protestant service and a Protestant funeral. And to be honest, I got the most positive echo with the Protestant. The ordinary modern Catholic, there was nothing. But the traditionalists don't like it. I think they are a little bit too narrow-minded for this kind of music. Yes,
it's interesting because it's sort of modern, you know, and it has that. It's, I guess, somewhat similar to Messiaen in the harmonic language. I mean, for music theory people, it's nothing like Messiaen, but for the average listener, you know, it's not. It's more progressive than traditional harmony. It's like way post-romantic. You know, it doesn't treat all dissonances like dissonances, and it's very color-oriented. So the music that comes out, you know, it creates these vast colors. And I guess maybe to someone who's not familiar with it and hasn't grown up with that language, maybe it sounds like modernism to, like, you know, like the traditional mindset is very skeptical of stuff that's modernist and postmodernist. But I don't know, in music, it's not always sort of trying to deconstruct everything. I mean, sometimes it's trying to find something that's missing. It's trying to give into the mystery, you know, and evoke the mystery in a way that maybe wasn't possible with the harmonic language of 100 years prior. So I don't know. Do you see some of that? I mean, that to me, that's, I think, maybe why, like, traditionalist people that don't know this kind of harmonic language might be skeptical at first.
Yes, there are two or even more important things missing, which an ordinary listener likes in classical music. There is no meter, or seldom there is a meter you can follow, and there's not the classical major minor harmonics. And these are two very important things for a classical listener. And exactly that what is pointing to the mysticism, as you say. Music is of its own the most spiritual of the arts, because if a painter paints something, he has to paint something real. Even only in the 20th century he can make an abstract painting. But the art of painting is a posteriori. And a novel or drama describes real people. But music doesn't. So there is this theory of that art is mimesis, imitation of nature. That's the most simple thing. But if a real artist makes a portrait of a person, he doesn't want to show, he looks like this and that. But somehow he wants to reveal the soul of this person. And that's true also in some things. Platonic speaking, art is going to the idea of something, and the eternal idea, but not of the individual image of the idea. And music even goes so somehow art bypasses the material thing and goes to the idea. But music goes even further. It bypasses the concrete thing and the idea and goes directly to the ultimate. That's Schopenhauer now, and he calls this ultimate Wille. But you can call it Tohen, or it's not important which name you give. But music is the most spiritual because it's the less material thing, the material of arts. So somehow these rhythms and meters and tonica, dominante, subdominante, melody, that are somehow the concrete things, concrete in music. And if you even this is not there, then it's even more higher up in a spiritual level than ordinary music. And that's the same with Arvo Pärt, for instance. There is very little things, musical things on the surface. It's only sound.
Right. Yeah, I think there's something too. I think for the ancient world, for the ancient peoples, there was something about the word, and there's something about breath. And so breath is sort of the same as spirit, and so what music plays with is it's playing sometimes physically with breath, which is, I think, one of the reasons that chant is so important in, basically every religion almost. And but specifically Christianity, it's super important, but also the East Asian religions. But also I think it's the idea of air. It's the manipulation of air to an ancient mind is the manipulation of spirit. And so it's at that higher level, because it's not the manipulation of matter, it's the manipulation of air. And that's what sound is. That's what music is.
Okay. Yes.
And so let me ask, because you've done a ton of contemporary music then. So it doesn't strike me that all contemporary music is like this. For example, Messiaen, Tournemire, definitely they were writing for the church. They were trying to evoke something mystical, but then Messiaen teaches, for example, Boulez. And so Boulez, even though, I have an appreciation for some of his stuff the same way I would for maybe a horror movie or some piece of brutalist architecture, it doesn't strike me that Boulez is trying to necessarily invoke something spiritual or Stockhausen. It seems to me that like Boulez, Stockhausen, some of these other super, modernist composers are trying to really destroy the foundations of Western music. And it seems to sort of be a more of a deconstructionist project than it is a mystical project. Do you see that same thing since you've done so much of that music? And what kind of a differentiation would you make?
Okay, there are certainly streams in modern art and music who are on deconstruction, but I think it's even more in paintry and in music is there deconstruction.
Because I think Boulez said, for example, with his second piano sonata, that his goal was to destroy sonata form. And Stockhausen said, that like his goal was, he looked at World War II and he wanted to destroy all of the aesthetic foundations that would have even built up a society that could have made the atrocities of World War II possible. And so it just seems like both of them are... Their music's interesting, but it is trying to destroy something. But I don't get the sense that Messiaen or Tournemire or, or even Penderecki, for example, are trying to destroy something. Or Varese, they're playing around with something else. It's a different telos, for example, perhaps.
Yes. So yes, I don't like Boulez. And as to Stockhausen, he doesn't write something for organ. But he has a kind of spirituality which is not the Western spirituality. He said this, he's coming from Sirius and things like that. There is a spiritual intent, but it's not the Western spirituality. But whom I was playing, that's, for example, Chelsea. Giacinto Chelsea I find very interesting. Yes, it's not a Christian spirituality, but this piece, this one organ piece from him, In Nome de Lucis, that's not anti-spiritual title at least. And it really opens some space which you can easily name spiritual. That deconstruction, for example, Xenakis, it's one organ piece, Meo, and there is a part where you have lay blanks, Brette, but on the organ, so that you can play all the keys of all three keyboards and pedal. First you make it on, and then you have done 20 seconds where you can toss around like a little baby, and this makes an incredible sound. And then you stop, and then the wind breaks down, and when you leave, the wind comes up, and this is an incredible sound like a rocket starting. And if there is a spiritual intent or not, but you can hear it as such.
That's I've played a little of Ligeti, and I think he does that in Volumina, and then I've played a little bit of Zygmunt Zopmary. Do you know Zygmunt?
Yes.
Zopmary.
Yes.
Yeah, I played his Hommage à BACH, but I saw a concert where Martin Schmedding did a juxtaposition of Bach pieces and Zygmunt Zopmary. It was very interesting. It was a very wild concert. It was actually the first concert I saw after I moved to Germany, and I was like, "Wow, this is not the typical American concert right here." But there was a piece about, it was like the Day of Wrath, or I think Der Tages der Zorn or something like that, and it was with a percussionist, and they had the big siren come out, and it was wildly effective. I mean, I am listening to the apocalypse right now. And so, I mean, I wouldn't have wanted it in the middle of a mass, but there was something true about it. I can say that.
Yes, spirituality is really a wide range. It's not only soft and sweet and calm. It's all of the other side. Apocalypse is also part of the Bible. And what we were discussing before, the intent behind. Is it important to know what the composer was thinking? I think not. It's more important what is written in the score and what you can read between the lines.
Yeah, so I guess that's like Daniel Barenboim arguing, of course I should be able to perform Mahler in Israel. Not Mahler, Wagner in Israel.
Of course,
it's like
yes.
because the music is transcendent of whatever Wagner's bad politics were, for example. And so it's like,
yes, and that's even another
itself.
thing. Does the even in the Catholic Church, you have this that the Mass is working ex opere operato and not ex opere operandi. That means it's if the priest says and does exactly what he has to do in the Mass is okay, even if the priest himself is not worthy. And so is in the music. It's much more like that. It depends on the music and not what the composer, if he is a good person or not.
Right. Yeah, that's an interesting parallel, and yeah. Someone once told me it seemed like some of the most degenerate people in the 20th century for composers wrote some of the most like kitsch music and music that was relatively tame. And then it was some of the most devoutly spiritual people who wrote the craziest, wildest avant-garde music. And you would think that it would be the opposite, but it doesn't necessarily correlate,
No,
you know?
no.
You can think of, like, I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't give examples, but... So, yeah, but Tournemire, l'Orgue Mystique. So, how long have you been prepping to record this whole thing?
I bought this score in 2008. And
Okay.
now and then I was playing a little piece, but not much. Starting in 2017, I was practicing 1-2 hours for the next Sunday. Even I couldn't reach the whole piece until next Sunday, but it gave me a basis. And starting from 2001, I made recordings. At that time, I had access to a very beautiful organ of Goll, the organ builder Goll, a 19th century German organ, and it's very beautiful, but it's not French. Then I had to stop and start anew with a French style organ. And last year, 2024, I was working 9 hours a day, 7 days a week, only Tournemire. And that's great, this concentration. That's really something interesting. But now I have to recover a bit.
Yeah, for sure. Do you mind if I ask? Do you have a wife and kids or family, or it's got to be
kids,
difficult?
no.
Oh, okay, it's got to be difficult if you. I can't imagine doing 9 hours a day right now. When I was in there's been times I've done 9 hours, multiple days in a row, but definitely not for a year at a time. But there is something that sounds blissful about that. I would love that for 6 months, 9 hours a day of practicing.
I told you that I was meditating many years ago, really, and then I had a job where I had not too much to do, and if I really didn't know I want to do this or that, I was sitting in meditation until it came up the wish, oh, I want to do this or that. What do you want? I want to drink a cup of tea. Okay, I drink a cup of tea, very calm. I say, come back, sit there. Nothing is there. Meditation. What do I want to do now? Oh, I want to practice for an hour. Okay, so I did practice 1 hour, and then sitting silent. And going on, so I was practicing 10 hours a day. Because just I don't want to do anything else. If I don't practice, I sit silent. And the result was my Vidor CDs.
Wow. You record the whole cycle?
4 of the
Okay.
symphonies, the middle section, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Yeah, it's a lot of work.
Yes.
What?
Yes, I have how do we say? I like someone told me a task which is possible to fulfill doesn't interest you. Perhaps he's right.
Yeah.
I have there's I was a composer. Ernst Helmut Flammer was a friend of mine, and he was writing an organ cycle of 100 minutes, and I accompanied it. When I met him, there were 3 numbers, and I played the Premiere of the 4th. I gave him the command for the 5th and was playing there. So we worked together, I think, for 10 years. And it's extremely complicated, and I think I'm the only one who ever played this piece.
What's the piece called?
Superverso per organo. And now there is a CD, a double CD and I don't play it anymore. I've played it enough.
Wow. So what's interests you about French music in general? You live in Switzerland, you're German, but you play a lot of French music. And from living in Germany, I can say, for example, I think I told you this on the phone, that most of the people that I met who were German hated Tournemire. And they thought Vidur was okay. And all the French, they liked Vierne and Duraflé, but they were really into Bach and Reger.
Yes.
And then the French organists that I knew, they couldn't stand Reger. To them, it was just a bunch of nonsense. Why would you want to? Why? It's too structural. There's no feeling. All of these sort of things. And so, what interests you so much in French music? And have you done all the Bach and the Reger and the Mendelssohn and all of that, but just don't feel the affinity towards it, or how do you feel?
Yes, okay, I have done Reger. I have played BACH and Morgenstern, Mendelssohn, most of the sonatas. I have been for 10 years organist in a Protestant church, and one of the pastor, he liked Bach, so I played only Bach when he was in service in church. Yes, but and what you say? When I started, or even before the study, that was the attitude that Vidur, that's nonsense. Only Bach is real music, and perhaps it was exactly because of that I started with Vidur. But I like this. Frank that's great. That's great music. I love it.
For sure, I think everyone can appreciate Frank. Frank is definitely
yes.
Yeah.
And as to Reger, yes, I can understand. Once there was a symphony concert in Zurich Orchestra, and I don't know what they were playing, and then Mozart Variationen from Reger with this fugue. Why boring people with such a fugue in a symphony concert? I can understand.
Okay.
Nevertheless, the great organ music, it's great. But I understand that's too heavy. It doesn't have this clarté esprit which French people like. Mm-hmm. Perhaps it's too German.
To me, I think I tried to listen to the complete Reger, just to listen to it all, And there were a few things that popped out, It got a little heavy at times. I mean, I love Wachet auf. Mm-hmm. I think that's one of just the best chorale fantasias ever. And it's especially, like, if you love that chorale, it's like Reger's Wachet auf is amazing. And, of course, BACH. And then the sonata in D minor, which I don't think is really done that much, I think is just top-notch piece. I would listen to that any day. But for sure, he wrote so much stuff, and it's kind of like Wagner, where I forget who said it, but he wrote exquisite exquisite half hours and god awful 2 hours or whatever it was, exquisite minutes and god awful hours. I think is just goes on and goes on. Now, I guess Germans could say this about Tournemire. Some of this stuff goes on, but it goes on in a different way. It's like the way that it goes on seems like a meditative state, which is a little different than. I mean, maybe you can get the same thing in Reger. I don't know, but do you see the same contrast?
No, I think that the spiritual level of Tournemire is higher. It's really spiritual music. As to Wagner, I think something like the Tristan Vorspiel, that's absolutely high rank in European music. There is nothing which can top it. And yes, during the opera, yes, but these things are so beautiful and so such a peak in human consciousness. What man can do, that's absolutely great. So you don't say anything against Wagner.
Yeah, well, I've listened to the whole Ring cycle. I mean, it's great, you know, it's great.
Yes.
But, it's Tristan and Isolde, I love. I absolutely love, especially the prelude and the Liebestod. That is definitely the height of music. And of course, my favorite rendition of that, you know, I have to be careful about which Germans I say this to, but is Furtwängler. To me, Furtwängler is the greatest conductor of all time. And I think he gets a bad rap. For those who don't know, it's like, you know, he tried to emigrate to the United States. He tried to get away, and he was kind of stuck, and they kept him back. And between him and Carry On definitely had the wrong politics, and and Furtwängler maybe not so much, you know. But it seems as though it doesn't help that all the videos of him, you know, at the Third Reich rallies with the swastikas in the background definitely doesn't help the image of Furtwängler. But if you know the story behind Furtwängler and Carry On, then it's like, okay, well, it's super sad to me that he's gotten caught with this like horrible reputation, where in reality Furtwängler actually saved the lives of a lot of his musicians. And anyway, but that says nothing about his music. To me, his music is the best.
As we said before, you have don't judge the music on his morality or on his politics. He is a musician, and the music is great. As to Furtwängler. And look what is happening now in Europe, in Germany. It's the same thing. Everybody follows this ideology of Klima and green and woke until Trump came. In the you don't say this word, in this time in 2020, everybody was obedient, and it's the same thing. It's the same thing.
Yeah, I was there during the lockdown, and I just thought, my goodness, if the government said just stay in your apartment until you die, everyone would just stay in their apartment until they died. And I'm like, this is like, come on, people, think for yourselves. Just a little bit.
But that's no more allowed to think for yourself.
Yes, yeah, it was. Oh gosh, it was. When things got bad in Germany, I went back to the United States, and then when things loosened back up again, I would go back to Germany, and I kind of went back and forth for a year. But they were thinking of closing down all of the Holy Week services because they were like, oh, our numbers have gotten out of whack. We're gonna just like say nothing can happen for the next week, and that week was Holy Week. And I thought, I'm going to get myself kicked out of the country of Germany. Because I'm like, I'm going to go get a bullhorn, and I'm going to go stand in the square and say, this is ridiculous. And I, you know, of course, which I shouldn't do because I'm not German and I'm here to study. But it's like, what ridiculous. You can't shut everything down for Holy Week. There was enough backlash then that then they kind of rescinded that plan. But anyway, off of that tangent, let me... I would love, because you've done so much music, you have such a big career, and I think we probably have somewhat similar musical tastes, and an appreciation for Furtwängler. One, not a lot of musicians that I know Furtwängler, so there's few people that I can ask this about, and hardly anyone I know is like obsessed with Furtwängler. But to me, when I'm listening to Furtwängler's renditions of, for example, Beethoven symphonies, even though it's not nearly as clean as, for example, Carry On or Bruno Walter or some of the people who come, you know, a little bit later, to me, I've heard the Beethoven symphony afterward. Like, I didn't hear moments. It wasn't moments that I heard, but I heard the piece. And it's as though he understands the form of the piece, and maybe the Platonic through line, you could say, the essence of the piece, so that even with crazy changes in, tempo, you still get like the whole structure. And it's also interesting, in Germany, almost no one knew Anton Schenkerian analysis. It's like that was not part of the curriculum for example, in Freiburg, that was not part of the curriculum at the Hochschule. But in the United States, of course, Schenkerian analysis is really important, and like people do classes on Schenker. Ironically, I'm about to finish my doctorate. I've never actually had a class on Schenker, but I thought his stuff was interesting enough. I read a couple of his books, and then I read a book about Schenker, so I'm plenty familiar with the theory behind it, even if I wouldn't be the best at doing my own graph. And what I didn't realize is Schenker was Furtwängler's composition teacher.
Ah, I didn't know. Yes.
Yeah, and so I'm wondering if maybe there's a through line from this sort of Schenkerian thinking of everything as multi-layers of foreground and background, which sort of create a cogent view of an entire piece, which would then go to Furtwängler. And if that was his biggest, conception of form, and if that's possibly why I think his music is generally like the best interpretations of some of the standard symphonic repertoire. So I don't. How does that strike you? What do you think?
That sounds
Sorry
logic,
for the long spiel. Yeah.
Yes, it sounds logic. Yes, I didn't know that Furtwängler was a disciple of Schenker, but that it makes something clear. Yes, I think we are right.
And do you sense the same thing with Furtwängler's interpretations?
I'm not so in detail, but in general, I really appreciate his interpretations.
Sure. Yeah. So, anyway, we keep going on tangents away from Tournemire, but
yes,
it's all related somehow. It's all related. I think the idea of holding a piece together from the beginning to the end, is.
I think that's a problem with the contemporary art of interpretation, with you want historical correct interpretation, and they caprice on details instead of seeing the whole form, the architecture of the scene. Yes, and that was
even Bach. There's some great like German, like old recordings before performance practice that I think get to some of the musical essence of some of Bach's masterworks better. Yeah. Even though the articulation's not really what it should be, and it's
yes. In the contemporary interpretation, the German proverb, "Du siehst den Wald nicht vor lauter Bäumen." You don't see the forest, but many trees.
Right. Yeah. With one of my teachers, David Franke, one thing I could say about his interpretation, which I think came from Ludger Lohmann, was, he took the idea of the articulation of cadences to try to create like a hierarchy of cadences. So it wasn't just, you have this sort of ordinary touch, where everything is somewhat articulated, but this cadence matters more than this cadence. So it's going to be articulated slightly more, and you'll hold this cadence longer, and then just creating these super subtle differentiations between articulation of cadence, to me, sort of took the performance practice to a next level. Because then it's like, okay, well, now there's still the hierarchy there. There's still the Schenkerian thing. It's starting to see the forest again.
Yes, I had a organ, disciple, and he was making his thesis in mathematical music theory. And his doctor father, his professor, had invented a system which analyzing the music and was calculating an interpretation out of this analyzing, and they had a keyboard playing this calculated interpretation. Mm-hmm. So somehow you could think that is the most the highest level of interpretation, but it's not.
Yeah. Yeah.
Soul is missing. You have to, and that's even more in romantic music and Tournemire. You have to dive deep in this music, and as I said before, you have to come to the idea of the work. There's score which is written. There's some. Perhaps you heard the composer speaking in an interview. He has written something about. Yes, that's all nice to know. It's important to know which organ he was playing or which in other how instruments were made. But the most important is that you really get beyond these things and to come to the source, the idea in Platonic sense of this work. And this makes a hierogamos avec your soul, and then you can play it.
Mm. Yeah, and I would imagine that, you have a different take on L'Orgue Mystique or Tournemire because you've played the entire work than if you just played like one of them.
Yes, right? That's true. And while these years where I'm working on Tournemire, something changed. First I thought you have to play very slow, the slower the more mystic, but that's not true. Then I learned that Tournemire, he doesn't make these names like Allegro, Andante, Adagio. It's rather seldom, but he makes the metronome numbers. But it's crazy. Sometimes the metronome he indicates is exactly what I would say. Yes, that's perfect. Somehow it's so far away that I don't understand what he wants. So you have to be free from that. And one thing more, my wife is always accompanying me and listening when the piece was finished, and she said, 1 year ago, I saw images. I saw angels, I saw clouds and things like that. But not now, not anymore. And I think that's a progress towards the spiritual, towards the mystic.
That's interesting. In the East, in Eastern Orthodox, they have a different approach to spiritual meditation. So, for example, like the whole Ignatius of Loyola spiritual exercises where you're imagining things and you're thinking of Christ on the cross and all these other things. Typical Orthodox spirituality does not do that. In fact, ironically, even though they tend to be more image heavy because they have icons everywhere and they have tons and tons of images, but they also say when you meditate not to have an image.
Yes.
They actually sort of reject the imaginal to some degree because they say that's dangerous and you can fall subject to what they call as prelest, which is sort of deception, So they say, as you're praying, like the Jesus prayer, for example, don't imagine anything. So that's interesting to me that you said your wife at first, as you played, she saw angels and things, and then eventually she saw nothing.
Yes, and I told you that I was used to the Eastern sort of meditation. And there's no Zen meditation. That's absolutely nothingness. You don't make any thinking, of course, no thinking, no words, no image, nothing. And somehow it was strange to me that in the Western tradition, meditation is something you have sentences and you're thinking on concrete things. I don't think that's meditation in this sense. Okay, you have this Kyrie eleison, Kyrie eleison, Kyrie eleison. You say this the whole day. That's something totally different.
Well, maybe. I mean, isn't there mantras in some Buddhist meditation?
Yes, there are mantras, but it's not. I made this Zen meditation every day, and on Saturday it was a little bit great. And then before and then there were mantras recited. I think that was Sanskrit, and it was in the lowest level of the language. There was a drummer who made the rhythm, and it was very interesting. And sometimes I wanted to know what does it mean, and I read the translation, and yes, okay, it's fine, but that's not what it is all about. It's this the atmosphere, the energy, the aura, which is captured in this mantra. And the same is true in Western tradition. If you have the gospel sung in Latin by a priest in golden broderie clothes, accompanied by holy smoke, by acolyte and turifera, sung towards the north to the pagans. That's a totally, absolutely different thing as you hear when you hear the same text read in German. That's nothing. That's nothing.
I'm sort of in between. I'm in between, I think, on that one. So for me, I don't understand. I think I understand the historical reasoning behind only doing Latin, but I don't understand why there's not like a traditional Catholic move that's towards restoring the traditional Mass, but doing it in the local language. So, for example, like in the Orthodox, they didn't have the same thing, not really. Like in Greek Orthodox, it's in Greece. I mean, it's in Greek. And in the Slavic countries, they put it in Slavic. And, Cyrillic, even the name Cyrillic comes from the saints Cyril and Methodius, who created the alphabet for the Slavic people so they could put the liturgy and the scriptures into their language. And so for me, I think there's something about the intelligibility, but I'm there with you on the incense and the gold and the the singing of the text. And so I don't know.
In liturgy, it's not about understanding. That's the fundamental mistake. It's about the performing of a sacred ritual. Jan Assmann, a religion scientist, he makes the distinction with ritual religion and book religions. I think that distinction is correct, it exists, but he says the book religion, a religion based on a holy book, on a scripture, on text, is later than the ritual religion. That means it's on a higher evolutionary level. And he says the time of ritual religion came to an end with the destruction of the Jewish temple 70 after Christ. I say, no, from a spiritual level, the ritual religion is on a higher level, and writing is a downgrade, a decline from the real spiritual heights. And the end of the ritual religion was not 70 after Christ, but 1970 with the destruction of the Latin Mass.
Interesting. You really hate the Novus Ordo Mass, I see.
Yes, absolutely. Let's even go one path further. Do you know Jürgen Habermas, one of the last survivors of Frankfurt School? Mm-hmm. His famous book is in English, Theory of Communicative Action.
Okay.
And this is the credo of the postmodern. There is no absolute truth. Every truth must be constructed by the domination-free discourse of the subject. But 2011, he had a lecture, and he came to the end that in order that this course can go on and doesn't fall back to an eternal discussion, and there must be an end which you cannot anymore discuss or making in Frage stellen. No? And they said this must obviously be beyond speech, beyond language. And for example, he sees it in architecture. In Europe, there are roads built by the Romans which are still in use. There are towns founded hundreds or even 1,000 years ago, and the structure of the town and some buildings are still the same. How much did happen in these 2,000 years? But the street is there. And he goes even further and says the strongest grounding of a society is in the gesture communication of the sacred complex, he says. And he says, I don't see any problems. But if you look a little bit closer, there is a fundamental problem. What could be such a gesture? Or, you say gesture? Geste.
Gesture.
An acting.
Yeah.
Yeah? Yeah.
Gesture, yeah.
Gesture. For example, it's the turning of the priest to the rising sun. That's right from the beginning from humanity. In Stonehenge, the pyramids, where in so many cultures, this orientation towards the rising sun is important. And it's even the language. What does orientation mean? It comes from oriens, the rising of the sun. And
so my understanding of that.
Wait.
Sorry.
So, from the beginning of mankind until 1917, the Catholic priest was orientated to the rising sun, which is the symbol for the true, the God, the good. Christ was symbolized there, and then it's the turn away of the truth against the truth, the good, yes. And that is what Thomas von Aquin, for him it's the definition of sin. The Ordo Novo is not only not so good, but it's really the 100 degrees perversion of liturgy. Sorry for that, but that's my opinion.
Well, I'm Anglican, so, I'm not a Novus Ordo Catholic anyway. But it's interesting, my understanding, though, of the whole orienting towards the east is that in the ancient world, it was actually most of the pagan altars faced the west, faced the rising of the sun. And so that for Christianity, it was sort of a reversal towards it was a reversal that they faced towards the east. And they said it was Christ rising and Christ coming back in the last day. And in the ancient baptismal rites, when they would, they said, do you renounce Satan? That part of the baptism, do you renounce Satan and all of his evil deeds? I do renounce them. You can think of The Godfather where they're shooting everybody. That part of the baptismal liturgy. In the ancient liturgy, they would face west when they said, I renounce them. And then they would spit at the devil, because the devil was seen to be in the west.
Yes.
Yeah.
and now the priest is turned to the west.
Well, to give them some, some charity. I think the reasoning behind it is it's trying to be an invitation that we're all at one table and they're inviting everyone up to the. Yeah, I hate the whole ad popule thing. as well. I mean, in the Anglican world, it's like kind of mostly ad populae, which it's because they just kind of adopted it from Vatican II. But occasionally you'll find people do ad orientem, which I think is way better because it definitely shows the whole mediation thing. It's like the priest is there as as a representative of Christ who is, taking our prayers to the Father. And you don't get that if it's ad populae. So I agree with your final sentiment. It is interesting, all the things that you said about text and word. I know that was a big thing for Derrida and like where Derrida put what did he put word before speech or something like that? Like it's like everyone else had conceived of the spoken word as being predominant, but he actually conceived of as the written word as being predominant. And so it was sort of an attempt at a reversal because, he said there were like, depictions of stuff before there was.
Yes, I think this goes back until the this dispute in the 10th century or 11th century. How do you call it? Universalienstreit. That the question was: is der Begriff, the word, before or after? So, do you have hundreds of trees and then you construct one word which sums up all these trees to one category? Or is it inverse, that first there's the idea of a tree and even the name, and then all the trees are images of this one idea? And that is the spiritual approach, but the others have one.
I see. So would you then be the word is first?
The idea
that seems like
first.
The Platonic.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Okay. So,
yes.
Then let me challenge you then a little bit, right? Then, so I think I agree with you, right? Like the word is first. In the beginning was the word, John 1. But if that's the case, then how could ritual be preeminent rather than word?
Ritual is even more primordial. Yes. Let's go back to Habermas.
Okay.
He says, what is the difference between man and the higher primates, like chimpanzees or something like that? Chimpanzees can communicate in a communicative dyad. He can talk to one another, but he cannot show the other something else outside. That would be a communicative triade. Huh? Mm-hmm. And now, that's what is the distinction between man and chimpanzee, for example. If this third point is within our concrete reality, this is the beginning of human society. If it's not in the reality, but outside, it's the beginning of religion. So for him, religion is absolutely fundamental. It's a unique selling point. It's what really man differs from others. And first it was the gesture of pointing to something. And only then language arose from this. And it's most important that these gestures, as we discussed before, are maintained during the whole of humanity. But it's no longer. And that's really a fundamental problem. You mentioned John. The translation, German or English, das Wort, it's wrong. Ich kann das Wort so hoch unmöglich schätzen. Ich will es anders übersetzen. Am Anfang war der Sinn. That's true. Logos, yes, logos can mean word sometimes, but it's absolutely more. So I would translate in a modern language. In the beginning, there was some cosmic intelligence That's closer than to logos than word. And logos, you have this meme in logi, biology, or and that
it's like the rational principle, the logical principle.
Yes, and mathematics, logic, it's that, and it's not the word of language. And
well, I think there's a sense in which like word doesn't cover it. Like this is my understanding, and maybe I'm wrong. There's a sense in which word doesn't cover it because word is just like a declamation, like that's what that thing is, and there's something other about it that doesn't necessarily imply teleology, telos, but there's something about logos that is telos. It is like, to me, logos, it captures more telos than the English word does. You know, it's like the essence of a thing, but it is sort of intrinsically tied to, well, there is that, you know. So as you point like to the identity of a thing, sort of like the Aristotelian final cause, you know, is sort of tied up into logos, whereas our word isn't necessarily so. At least that's my understanding. So then my further question would be like, I get where you're coming from in that, like, well, as you point to something, then that gives it identity. Then as that identity then is the word for that thing, right? But from a Platonic sense, then if the word is preeminent, but not word as we say it, but like logos, like the logos of a thing, then it's the question of, well, how interconnected is what we conceive of as word and what we conceive of as logos as being preeminent? Because then it's like, it's sort of like the chicken and the egg, you know. It's like the thing that we point is the Platonic ideal of a thing exists before its instantiation. The logos is preeminent, but then it's the ritual that we point to that thing that then comes before the actual. I should have a different word for this, but like maybe before our explanation of that thing. So it's like,
okay,
ideal,
I think...
pointing, then explanation. And so then it's like the question of, well, does the word refer to the ideal, or does it refer to just the explanation? Does that make sense?
I think I come back. I think I should make lights on. Is it better? I think, yes. John.
Very good.
Okay.
We're getting off into metaphysics and
yes.
Bit,
so en arche en hologos. That's what religion is all about. The first thing, the primordial, is not manifest. It's transcendent. Mm-hmm. And then it comes down, but that is not something in time, but it becomes more concrete, more dense. And this is somehow what is happening on a metaphysical level. It's involution. But we awake down there in the physical world, and we have to go up. That's the evolution. So there are always both movements. In the holy ladder, angels are moving up and down. And the West has forgotten the down scale. He is imprisoned in a material thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And,
totally agree.
But the primordial thing is not manifest, and everything goes down. So, time is something in our world. It's not something transcendent. In evolution, there were several layers. First came the material world, then came life with the plants, then the animals, then mankind. The older something is, the more it's fixed. You can't manage, only with tons of energy, to break material things. The biological thing even works very fine. Your body, you don't have to think about breathing. Your body, if it's not ill, it's working. But culture is the last thing which evolved, so it's not so fixed. And even in culture, you have many layers, with the archaic layer, the mythic, the rational, post-rational, and so on. And one task of religion, not the task, but one is to make this religion, this binding, making this link back in history, to link man to the evolution. And so in human evolution, the ritual, the gesture, were the first, and then came the word and the Begriffe, the language. So you must really go back to this. But from a spiritual level, the transcendence is first, and there it comes down. So both things are true, but on different levels.
Sure. Yeah, I think for me, I think maybe it's a little bit of a Protestant still in me, but like the understandability of the text is important, even though it's like to some degree I also agree with apophaticism, as the Eastern Orthodox say. So there is a sense in which like every analogy fails. And so everything that you God is our shepherd, God is not our shepherd. Because that analogy can't go so far. And so then God is not our shepherd. It's ultimately transcendent of that thing. But I think the danger is I think you have to have both. I think you can't just start at transcendent because maybe that's not how we perceive things to begin with. So it's like there has to be a starting point. And so it's like I think like that's what the parables are. The parables point to like the kingdom of heaven. They point to ultimate transcendence, but they do so like through language that then points higher. So
yes, I don't think I would not say that language has nothing to interfere in religion. Of course, you must talk and you must try to understand as much as possible, and you must develop your language capacity as far to the most highest level possible, but not during the performance of the ritual. My ideal would be you have the Mass celebrated in Latin with beautiful music and at the highest level of performance. And afterwards you have a lecture of 3 hours on the university level at least. But these are two different things.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, at least in the ancient rites, there were moments of silence, and now there's not a lot of moments of silence. And it used to be like in the East they loved the cherubic hymn. Like we who mystically represent the cherubim do sing the thrice holy hymn, holy, holy, holy. For you are escorted to us invisibly by the angelic hosts. I think that's the cherubic hymn. And that's like the thing they sing as they parade the elements of the Eucharist from behind the altar to the people back into the altar. And so it's like a big moment of the Eastern liturgy. But that used to be a moment of silence. And when they started singing the cherubic hymn, like I don't know what year, like 600s or whenever it was. Evidently, it caused quite the stir because all the monks were super upset because they said, no, this is supposed to be a moment of silence. So even though the whole thing is, contextualized around words, there's still that drama and that point to which there is nothing that can be said. It's like last night I was listening to Mahler 9, and I listened to the Claudio Abbado from the Lucerne right before Abbado dies, and like the ending of Mahler 9 is sort of like dying away. And, everyone does this for effect, where like they don't make any noise like at the end of a piece and they let it sit still. And it almost has become cliche, but at the end of this Mahler 9, I swear it was like 5 minutes. And no one said anything and no one did anything. And it's like, wow, that was just pure silence. And like that was the essence of the piece. That
Exactly.
The essence of the piece was found even in the silence that came after it,
Exactly.
Yeah.
I also say the whole sense of the Hallelujah from Handel is the repairing the general pause before the last accord.
Yeah. Yes. Wow. Well, let me ask some really technical questions about the music stuff, if you don't mind. This is all fun, but I do have a few. I want to know, for example, like in Tournemire, the legato. And there seems to be two entirely different opinions in like French performers of doing the super hyper legato thing or not doing it at all. And I think it's my impression is that Dupré taught hard against it, against the super over legato thing. And so, for example, like even Daniel Roth, who does it sometimes but doesn't do it a lot, he said, oh no, Dupré says you don't do this. But then, I had lessons with Vincent Dubois, who does everything over legato, like including Bach, which is a little much sometimes. But all in all, the effect is great, So, what are your thoughts on this, hyper legato, one note bleeding into the next note, and how much should or should not that touch be used in Tournemire exactly?
You must listen what is appropriate in each situation. Of course, if there is a melodic line, it must be super legato. But if there is a virtuoso passage, you can't do it absolutely legato, you won't hear nothing. And one thing more, Tournemire writes over and over this slurs. Mm-hmm. But even under the slur, he makes this thing which separates the notes. So it does not, obviously that does not really mean exact legato. But yes, you have listened to each moment how much legato is appropriate. I don't want to make a doctrine of that.
But there's a continuum there, right? I mean, so like
yes.
Some French performers wouldn't basically never do over legato, even like in Vierne, and then others would do tons of over legato. And so did Tournemire himself have a specific thought towards legato, like Dupré, for example?
I honestly don't know if he had written something exactly on legato. But I see this the score, the autograph, I see the slurs, and I hear the music. And I think 90% or 80% of times the super legato is adequate.
Okay.
But don't make a doctrine out of it.
Sure. And you recorded this on a Hauptwerk organ, correct?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but what is the sample? It's the Kavai can, is that right?
Yes, but extended.
Okay, how so?
Tournemire was organized in Saint-Sulpice, this Kavai organ. But as he had become it from his master, César Franck, he did write the L'Orgue Mystique from 1977 to 31, something like that. The registration he made even before. There is a book where he has noticed all the chorales which he wanted to compose and the registrations even before. And then the registrations, which are very differentiated and very nuanced, are not possible on his Kavai organ.
Really?
Only perhaps 10% is possible. And only
it's sort of like Bach. Sorry, it's sort of like Bach writing the B in the Fantasia,
yes,
where it's like that didn't exist on any of his organs, but he's like, it should be this.
Yes, so he makes very precise indications about the stops to use, and there's many. He calls it petite mixture in German aliquots. It's nasal, tierce, 2 feet, and these things. But he hadn't in Saint Clotilde. Only after the composition was finished, he had added 10 stops. But even then, it was not yet possible to make everything like he wanted. And most important, every manual has to be expressive in a swell box. Every. Even the pedal. In pedal, only once he really writes in pedal. It's a piece where all the manuals and the pedal 4 times is trompette harmonic. And each one has its individual this fork for crescendo, decrescendo, even the pedal. He writes pedal, trompette harmonique, boîte fermée, then crescendo, boîte 1/3 open. So precise is it. But that's the only time that he once really writes the pedal expressive. But if all the 3 manuals are expressive, the pedal also has to be, for it's not possible that it is so starr, so fixed, if all the other things are floating. So, the
American organs may be better than a lot of French organs because everything is under expression and like.
Yes, perhaps that's true. Yes.
Know, traditional American organs, not.
Yeah, but then the organ of Caen is a little bit bigger than Saint Clotilde, and it has some of the stops which Tournemire wanted but didn't have.
Like
then the firm.
Like those mixtures?
No, Quintatön 16 says, Quintatön says he didn't have, but he wanted, and the mixture came later. And then the Sonus Paradisi, who made the sample set of Caen, he himself added exactly some of the stops which Tournemire wanted, but only 3 of them. And the Hauptwerk community, together with an informatical computer specialist, they blew it up to a really gigantesque organ. And I had only to add some few calm stops, soft stops, because they were missing. And every manual swellable. That's the point. And that's, yes. And with Hauptwerk you can make it absolutely precise. You can open the positive to 53 and the resi to 69%.
Now, what would you say, though, to those, because, for example, like my professor at UNT, he hates Hauptwerk. He hates all of that. He's definitely a purist. He hates the fact that at Notre Dame, they gave it a modern action rather than having like an older action. He's very much a purist when it comes to all of those sort of things. So, to critics like that, I mean, what good points do they have? Like, what are the negatives of Hauptwerk? And then, what would be your argument against them? Saying, well, this is just way better. Obviously, some of the things you just said and the precise control, and you can make hypothetical examples,
Okay, you have to make the distinction between live playing and making a recording. If you, I would never be befürworten. I would never be support a Hauptwerk organ in a church. But if you make recordings, it's something different. If you make a recording of a real organ, you have some mics. You have afterwards in the studio, you can mix it up. You can make many things. And then in the end, you hear it over your speakers. And then in Hauptwerk it's the same. In the end, you hear it through speakers, and you have some in between. You have some possibility of manipulating, as you have it in a recording of a concrete physical organ. But you have more possibilities, as I described. So, one difference is that most important for organ sound is the mixing of the sound in the room. And in live, it's the real church, the acoustic of this church, where it's mixed. In Hauptwerk, this is the most complicated part to calculate. But I think they manage quite good now. And in this special case, where Tournemire, even the composer, didn't think of a real organ, but of a hypothetic organ, which he didn't have. And the extreme things he demands. I would have to travel around 1,000 of kilometers to find the right organ, and I would have to hire it for months. That's not possible. So in this case, I think it's really a blessing that we have this, and that I can work at my studio as long as I want until it's perfect. I think I would not make a Bach recording in Hauptwerk. There are, there you have historical organs where you can go to. I think, yes, that's different story.
But it's different.
Yes, it's different.
Yeah. Yeah, I did my Bach recording in Waltershausen.
Yes.
And to me, I wouldn't change anything. It's like I didn't know many. Now I think there's been a couple recordings of Klavierübung 3 done there. But, I don't know. For me, it was perfect. And it was like...
Yes, I understand, yes.
Yeah, it would be kind of hard to imagine doing that on Hauptwerk. But I wonder if this is...
I wouldn't.
I wonder if this is sort of some of the future of recording. Because, I think it's twofold. It's like we've had the problem of recordings for a long time. Like it's like the problem of people not buying recordings and streaming. A long time, in the grand scheme of things, not a long time. Maybe but the last 10, almost even 20 years... CD sales have just gone way down because now it's all free. People are streaming. And the problem is people will stop making recordings because they won't have people buying the CDs. But then there's also the case where people can just, find they have the access to everything. They don't have to go buy a CD because they don't need a CD player. And so then I wonder if this sort of this type of recording is the wave of the future. But then just as with like AI, just as the artificial becomes, becomes more of a thing, and these types of recordings become more of a thing, then I wonder if people will, whereas they also stop going to concerts, I wonder if people will start going to more concerts. Because they'll say like, oh, I want this like really overly produced thing that I listen to, but I'm really interested in hearing what does it sound like on that organ in the space. And so I'm wondering if that's sort of the direction things are going. Less CDs, more Hauptwerk recordings, and more live concerts.
You have to make the distinction between the recording and the way how it is distributed. To make a streaming on YouTube or on this on Apple Music and whatever, you must make the recording. And if you sell it via CD or via streaming or download, that's the second question. The first question is, do you make a recording via Hauptwerk or via a real organ or via artificial intelligence? That's even one step further. I don't want to say that this is the recording of the future. I made it in this special case for the reasons I told you. But I wouldn't say that is how it's going on the next 100 years. If this is to the damaging the real concert or a help, I don't know. Perhaps I think organ music is more common since it can be streamed. And I could imagine that quite some people who never listened to organ music, when they hear a good YouTube video, they are interested in, I would like to hear how it's in our church. I don't think it's a problem. That can exist both parallel.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And I think even organ performing has gained in the last years. There are really, really wonderful recordings on YouTube and on CD, and there are organists with a very high level. That was not in my youth, I don't think. I think Horowitz or Rubinstein have never been surpassed. There is no pianist today who can really compete with them. But organists, I think there are quite a number which is somehow better than the masters of my youth.
What about, well then let me put you on the piano thing just as, as an aside. What about Zimmerman? Because to me, Zimmerman is every bit the level of Horowitz,
I don't know. I don't know.
Or Sokolov.
Perhaps. Look, I was listening to the Nocturne from Horowitz, and I listened to him thousands of times. It's so great. Or this one recording of Schubert Impromptu. I think it has 2 million clicks on YouTube, and yes, it's really fantastic. It's simple but fantastic.
And there's something about the particularity of those people themselves. Like, okay, so let's say that Zimmerman can play cleaner, and maybe even some of his interpretations are more refined. It's never going to be Horowitz, because Horowitz lived at a particular time. He was from the Russian tradition. He was friends with Rachmaninoff. He had the career that he had. People loved him the way that they did. It's like, I think there's maybe a degree of hope there, because it's like both as there's never going to be another Horowitz, well, there's never going to be another you, So it's like people to some degree, everyone like should have their idols that they look up to, but there's the particularity of your own circumstances. So I don't know, it can be depressing as trying to be an artist looking and saying, oh, I'm never gonna be Horowitz, I'm never gonna never gonna be Bach. Yeah, but like Bach couldn't be you. Of course Bach is the best, but like what you're doing is still important too. You know what I mean?
Yes, what you said before. Yes, it's always the whole. You have to regard the whole thing, the time, the zeitgeist, which was very different in the 1980s from it now. But yes, I don't think that I don't have any hope. And no, there are. Or perhaps there was in Solothurn there was a very young conductor from Estonia or something like that. I don't think she's in her 20s. And she was conducting Fauré Requiem. And it was so great. That was really music. And in such young years, that's fantastic. I don't even know her name. She's not very known. But yes, so the geniuses exist even today.
Yeah. Even like, by no means do I think I'm a genius, but I would say there's been moments where it's like there were like 10 people in church, but yet I played something, and I'm like, that's the best I've ever played that thing, and it's the best I probably will ever play that thing, and the most moving I've probably ever played that thing. And like one person was impacted by it, nobody else. And it's like, well, that's music, man. That's just what it is. Sometimes when you're in front of 1,000 people, it's not as good as when you're in front of 5. It's like sometimes the grace of God is there, and sometimes it's not.
Yes, that's true. Yes.
So a few more, quick technical about the chants. Is there anything that you might have to say about how he manipulates the Gregorian chants for the Sundays that he writes the pieces for, and
okay, yes.
Some things that you've noticed?
Yes, you have made, as we said in the beginning, it's always 5 pieces, and the way he treats the chants is different. The first piece is a Prélude à l'introit. It is exactly what it is. It's a prelude to the introitus, and it's played in this short break between the Aspergisme and the introitus. The priest has sprinkled the holy water over the parish. He comes back and he changes the robe. He puts down the pluviale and puts on the castle. This is perhaps 1 minute, and this time the prelude is played. The chant normally is played once from A to Z in a key which you can sing. You can easily detect it, follow it. It ends on a chord so that the scholar finds the first note to begin. That's quite easy. Communio is almost the same, but there is a little bit more time to cover, 2 or 3 minutes, and the Communio is a little bit shorter mostly, so there's more freedom. He can repeat phrases. There are parts where there's no chorale at all, but it's still in a key that can be sung. Even more freedom is in the offertoire, which is the longest of the short pieces, perhaps 4 to 5 minutes. There's more freedom. It can be several sections, RBR or RB, or even 2 parts, very different, contrasting parts. And he's freer what to do with the chorale, and, important, it's not in a key you can sing. So it's either too low or too high. There are two theories. One say it is played after the sung Gregorian chant. Others say it replaced the singing of the chorale.
Okay.
The third is the number 3 of the 5 pieces is Elevation. It's after the Wandlung, the transubstantiation, the second part of the canon, and it's very quiet. And there is no chant around, so it's free what to choose. And often he comes back to the Alleluia of the Graduale, or he even takes perhaps an antiphon from the Matins or the Vesper or something like that. The most freedom is in the pièce terminale, which has a duration of mostly 8 minutes, but it can last more than 12 minutes, and he uses 1, 2, 3, or 4 chorales together. It can be from the Sunday, but it must not be from the Mass. Perhaps it's from the Matutin or the Vesper or something like that. Or perhaps it's the antiphon from the Matins of Tuesday after the Sunday.
Okay.
And there are even some chorales which don't fit absolutely not to the Sunday. For example, very important is this Ego Dormivi. It's from the Matin of Easter. And nobody knows this chorale. Even a regular devotee to the classic traditional Mass would not recognize this chorale. But there is one sentence, et resurrexi, which obviously is very important to him. And this chorale is in a broad statement, perhaps in the pièce terminale for Epiphany. There really, it's clear that's that. But it's often cited very, very fast. And he leaves out some notes. Or he even makes only this period et resurrexit. But the less notes you take, the less you can really decide, is it that chorale or not? Because some phrasing is the same in many chorales. So there, the quotation of the chorale somehow evaporates. And one thing more, if there is a sequence of equal notes in the chorale, Thunemeyer only writes 1. Even if a phrase starts with the same note as the phrase before has ended, Thunemeyer says only once this note. He even omits the pause in between. That means that the phrase structure of the chorale is destroyed. And he writes about it. He says, I use the chorale just as I need it. And in the preface, which is printed in every volume, and it's written by hand in every volume of the autograph, he said, librement paraphrasé. And that's, you have to really take literal, librement. He never indicates the title. He could write Toccata sur Veni Creator, as many composers did. He never does this. The titles are neutral, prelude, toccata, paraphrase, musical title, or neutral, just chorale or alleluia. But he never indicates which chorale he uses. So I would say it's a misunderstanding if this hunting for the chorales. They are there, but you don't have really to follow him. It's not a quotation, but it's more than the painters the French painters of the end of the 1900s. They didn't paint anymore the nature as it is, but their impression. I would not say that Tournemire is an impressionist, but it's not this concrete thing. And I think it's the same mistake that if you want to know, to follow every text of the Mass in your language, it's there. It's about the aura of this chorale. And someone who in this time when the liturgical Mass was quite normal and everyone was going every Sunday to the Mass, you know which gospel is on this Sunday and which chorale is sung, and you discover it in Tournemire, and yes, oh, that's it, but you don't need to follow note by note. That's
And the ones that he took from like a Tuesday, for example, did he take that purely for musical reasons, or was it often theological reasons?
Yes, there are musicologists who try to discover theological reasons. But again, I would say that's not so important. What is reality? Is reality real? No, it's... Okay. When you look at the brain from from the outside, it's this grey mass. And there are thousands of processes going on. Electrochemical processes, biochemical processes. The synapses are firing and are connecting and things. You can even find out somehow which areas on the skull or on the brain are alert when you do this or that. But you cannot really make this connection. So the brain from without is this thing, this material thing. The brain from within, this is your thoughts, your emotions, your feelings, and also your perception of the world. So, on the one side, the brain is in the world. On the other side, the world is in the brain. And that's it. That's not a new discovering. That's Scotus Eriugena, theologian of the 10th century. He said, "There's nothing in the world which is not in man consciousness." So man is the officium, manufactura, the fabric, who makes all. So the whole world is somehow a construction from the evolving consciousness. So, as we said before, music is also a manifestation of the transcendent, parataktisch to the world, not secondary to the world, but on the same level. And religion also. So you have three spheres which are interpenetrating, but you cannot really make them deckungsgleich, really together. So it's not so. This theological thinking is one way to approach the transcendence. Music is another way. You can find some parallels, but that's not needed. There are two spheres which are self-sufficient and are both ways to the transcendence. If you find this chorale, yes, it makes sense in a theological thing, okay, that's fine, but it's not necessary.
Okay. Yeah, and it seems like Tournemire's thing was mostly in using them for musical material anyway.
But that's not some Gleichgültigkeit. It doesn't neglect. Oh, it doesn't matter which I use. No, it's there, but it's so deep down. It is so this Catholic world that spontaneously he uses something which fits.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it's not arbitrary.
Yes, that's a word. Yes.
Yeah. The so for young organists that are, they're like, which of these 51 should I play? Which might you recommend? What's a few that are the most beautiful or maybe the most accessible?
When I started with Tournemire, there were some numbers which I thought, oh, that's great, and the other, oh, no, I don't like. But then I learned this means I have not yet come to an end. I have not yet really, it had not yet entered in me. And now I think they are all beautiful. There is not one piece which is not very beautiful. But but it's astonishing the variety of moods and atmospheres what he can create within this narrow fence from the liturgy. So, if you want one whole office, perhaps number 20, there it's all in the Saint Joseph. It goes from pianissimo to great tutti, from very calm to virtuoso, mystic, and it's not too far from mainstream organ music. It's a typical Tournemire, but not extremely Tournemire. And it depends on the technical skills. No one of the number 5 is really easy. But yes, there are some who are very difficult, but this 20, for example, yes.
Which is the hardest?
Perhaps 17.
Okay.
The finale. It's also a question of tempo. This is a case, the 17, where I would say what the tempo, the metronomic number, is exactly perfect, but it's horrible, quick, fast.
Yeah, it's like the Dupré G minor. I was looking at that and
Yes.
listening to some recordings, and I'm like, oh, I mean, was this the hardest piece in the world? That doesn't seem that hard. And then I listened to the Dupré recording at the tempo he took it, and I was like, okay, yeah, that'd be like the hardest thing ever. That would be insane. I guess it's probably the same thing with the Tournemire. It's like, well, anything's easy if you take it slow enough. So
Yes.
yeah. So interesting. Yeah, well, hopefully more people will check it out and start to learn some of them. I think probably just as many people will say, I'm going to tackle the hardest one as they will, I'm going to tackle the easiest one. It'd be interesting. Might have more organists say, I'll tackle 17 now than 20. But
Yes, and you should play the whole office, and not only number 5. Many organists play only the 5 because it's a big piece and you can show your technical qualities. And the number 1 and number 3, they are calm, they are single lines, but you have really to go inside. And they are, for me, I would say they are even more interesting than some of the number 5.
yeah, it's like everyone skips the first movement of L'Ascension, but it's the best. You gotta play the whole thing. You can't skip stuff. It's like skipping repeats. You can't skip repeats.
I didn't understand.
I said, oh, that's like skipping repeats in a Beethoven sonata. You can't skip the repeats. It's like a
Yes.
integral part to the sonata. It's like it's unbalanced if you don't repeat it, you know?
Yes. Yes, and the question is how. It was meant for the liturgy, but in liturgy it's separated. There's so much in between the numbers, and to be honest, a mass, the duration of a mass is perhaps an hour. From Tournemire, what is inside the mass, it's perhaps 10 minutes. So you cannot make an effect on the whole mass with this little music. It's much more important the quality of the scola, and if there's some other music. And what I now, for me, it's important to hear the whole, and even the length of the pauses between the numbers is important. And you will hear number 4 in a different way, a different mood, when you have heard the 4 little pieces before. And during these 20 minutes of Tournemire, you come in a special state if you hear it from A to Z. And I cannot hear 2 offices one after the other. That's too much.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Well, great. And so what's the schedule of releasing them? I think you've released, 15 or 16 now?
Now we are 14. It's the Quinquagesima. So I will release it always on exactly the day it is provided for. Now there's a break because we are in Lent. The next is number 15, Dominica Tertia in Quadragesima. Gaudete or letare. And then again it's a break, and then it's number 16 Sabato Santo, number 70 Easter, and then it goes on more or less regularly.
So you'll release them liturgically as they would go?
Yes.
Okay. And you're releasing them all on Facebook, YouTube, Spotify?
Yes. And there are, I think, about 7 releasing platforms: Apple Music, Amazon, Spotify, Tidal, Idagio.
Wow.
Yes.
That's intense.
But you have one, how to call it, aggregator. You load it up once and he just distributes it.
Oh, okay. Who's that?
I have a Plattenfirma to go. They are in Cologne.
Oh, okay.
But what is important is the quality, the technical quality, the sound quality, and the highest is Dolby Atmos. There, and that's don't know. That's a new system. So we had mono in the 19th century, then came stereo, then quattro and surround 5+1, something like that. And now Dolby Atmos has no limits. But you can. We have made a 7-1-4. That means you have the 4 quattro speakers. You have 2 side speakers. You have the center speaker. The bass we don't use, it's too much. And we have 4 speakers in the heights. And this is a kind of standard. And when you can reproduce it, if you have these speakers at home, and this is absolutely tremendous, the atmosphere. You are really like in a church. You look to the organ, and the organ is there, but the whole room is around you.
Wow.
But you have to have this setting at home. But if you have perhaps 4 speakers downstairs and 2 upstairs, it's calculated it down so that it sounds right. So.
Okay.
And we made, of course, an ordinary stereo down mix.
Yeah. Sounds great. Well, people should check it out. And thanks for thanks for coming on here and chatting with me. Yeah.
Thank you for your interest in my music.